It's time to build your lab. I'm going to go through this set of instructions here. I'm going to do a little demonstration about how I do it, but you're going to have to get used to this. You're going to have to do this for yourself. A lot of the books that you read say, oh, install the operating system in a dual boot to your main computer. Maybe you might want to think about doing this in a virtualized environment. Now, what that virtualization will do is it will take away some of the things that you're used to. You won't see a real network card, you'll see an interpreted network card. Now, first let's talk about virtualization. What is it? Well, we run one operating system on top of another operating system. And what's great about that is your underlying operating system doesn't change. So if you actually are running Linux right now, you could run Linux on top of Linux inside this virtual shell. Why would you want to do that? Well, because you're going to wreck stuff. You're going to do things that you really shouldn't be doing on a regular base operating system. You wreck it and you learn it, and the really cool thing is that you don't have to rebuild it. You can just go back to a previous version of it. So as long as you're paying attention to virtualization and learning a little bit about it, you can blow up your operating system every single different way, and there's no fail. There's no blow up, really, because you just revert back to a previous version. That's the excellent thing about virtualization, and that's a great way to learn what we're doing here. So let's talk about VirtualBox. Now, this is from Oracle. There is another competing virtualization out there. It is called VMware. VMware is a much more stable product for a true virtualized environment. But Oracle's VirtualBox is free. So you might not be able to afford VMware. All the things that you're going to see us do are going to be in VirtualBox as opposed to VMware. Now, personally, when I do my testing for my organization, when we go out and we do penetration testing against other people, I use VMware because it's much more stable, and also I can put a lot more security around the outside of it based on our needs in our business. But this is about the learning thing, so let's do that. So you download VirtualBox, and I've actually downloaded, but I haven't installed it on this machine, and we're going to see that in a minute. There's something called the virtual pack, or the application pack that goes on top of virtualization for VirtualBox, and you want to also install that. They're right next to each other on the download window, so it's pretty easy to do. Let's take a look right here and see what VirtualBox looks like, and we'll go to virtualbox.org. Notice I just clicked on the link and it just opened it up right for me. I go to the download section right here and pick it for your platform. It's for all platforms: Windows, OS X, Linux, and Solaris. I actually run it on both Windows host and OS X. I have a Mac as my default operating system for my Mac that I carry around with me. It's a nice, easy laptop for me. Notice right down below that, so you'll see all these different 310s, and then it actually goes for Linux host. It's a little bit different, but we're running Linux on Linux for testing purposes. I don't think that you probably have Linux as your base operating system right now if you're taking this course. You'd probably already be working with it and you wouldn't need our course. Once you choose Windows host right here, below that, notice it says VirtualBox Extensions Pack, and that's what it's called. It's for all supported platforms. Now, over time, this VirtualBox is going to upgrade, and so be ready for that. So you download both the Extensions Pack and VirtualBox for your platform. I'm going to go and take a look, and you're going to see those on mine in just 1 second. Now, you can't just load one operating system for this. It's not going to work. You've got 2 different distributions that you must know for your exam. But you must know because on a day-to-day basis you may be working with the tools of one or the other. So you would go and you would get at a minimum 2 distributions. I run about 6 or 7 distributions, but for this course I'm only going to do Debian and Fedora. So if you go to the Debian site, what you'll notice is, and let's take a quick little look right there, you'll notice that they have they have small installation images and they have large installation images. You need to go and see where this download and install image is for your particular operating system. Now, if you're using VirtualBox, it's based upon the underlying operating system. If you've got a 32-bit operating system, you need a 32-bit version of Debian for VirtualBox. If you've got a 64-bit operating system, or the underlying hardware is 64-bit, then you need a 64-bit version of this. Suppose it's not 32-bit or 64-bit, or it's not a standard Intel operating system. For instance, if you take a look here, these are called Raspberry Pis, and this is based upon ARM, ARM architecture. It's a little bit different, but I can load Linux onto this. So you have to know what your underlying architecture is. We'll discuss that a little bit later in the course. So let's go back here for just a second. Notice that I've also got a listing for Fedora. You want to go to Fedora and download their version. This is going to come in the forms of ISOs. You could do a direct install via network inside virtualization and it would work just fine. For your first couple of installations, do it the easy way. Now, once you've got VirtualBox in place and the extensions pack, there is something called VirtualBox Tools. For the Debian version of it, the virtualboxes.org location will actually give you a really good tutorial on how to install those VirtualBox tools. But for the Fedora version, it's not really as good. So what I tell you to do is go to zealfortechnology.com and follow their rules, their instructions there. It's a little bit better, a little bit more robust. Now, let's back up just for a second. You could install to your physical box if you wanted to, on the live disk. The problem is that, well, that's probably not what you want to do when you're testing out and wrecking an operating system as you're playing with it. So you could do this thing called a live disk. What's really great about a live disk is there's no risk to your production environment. You can actually put it on a CD or a DVD, or you could pick up one of these USB drives right here and install it to a USB drive and plug that into your machine. It would use all the facilities of the machine, it would be stored out here. So a live disk is not a bad way to go. I tend to tell people to use the USB 3 if they're going to do the live disk. It's a little bit snappier and it works a little bit better. But you could do it on any removable media. You could do it on this. This is a USB LaCie and FireWire drive. I can actually run FireWire as my base operating system. I can run Linux as my base operating system through a FireWire connector into my Mac. Just another way to do it. So it's a serious commitment to install to a live host, and a lot of people say, well, if you don't want to do that and you want to make sure that your primary operating system is okay, they say to do dual booting. Now, we'll talk about dual booting, but I don't think that you've made a commitment there. But remember, there is that other way. There is another, and that's the virtualization. That's what you and I are going to do here. Now, what's great about this is you have all the joy and none of the risk, all the joy of using the base underlying operating system and none of the risk of installing where you can't get to those tools that you desperately need. If you have to use this Outlook widget or that particular executable because that's part of your business, well, you don't want to wreck your business in order to learn this thing. So that's why we use virtualization. Now, today, what we find out is that virtualization is seeping into everything. You may have heard of it called the cloud. That's kind of a part of virtualization. The cloud just means instead of the virtualization being done on my physical box right here, it's done, well, out there on somebody else's physical box. And then we just reach across the network to get to it through an IP address. I like VirtualBox from Oracle. You can do the VMware version of this. I think it's a little bit more stable, but our instructions that we're doing right here are only for VirtualBox. Now, there are a whole bunch of different Linux distributions out there. We're using Debian and we're using Fedora. I think the third version that you would choose for your regular work to learn what we're doing here may be SUSE. If you're a security person, you might want to choose a different version of the operating system. What's great about the Linux distributions is they are very customized to a particular need of a particular audience. Now, there are all sorts of different versions of who, where things came from. What was the original core Linux? And then what one came from which one? Who begat who? We really don't care about that, but we can see the major branches that we have here. Now, I know that you really can't zoom in on this, and this is kind of small, so you want to go out and you want to type in Linux distributions, and in this case, type in Linux distributions and the word mind map, because that's what this is. This is how I do a lot of my learning, is through mind maps. So look and see how somebody's got it all laid out in a really nice branching statement for you so that you can understand where this comes from. And remember, a lot of this is opinion, so you don't have to necessarily agree completely with it. Okay, so which ones do we care about? Fedora and Debian. Debian, due to the fact that we really, really want this operating system because it is the core desktop for most distributions that are out there. Okay, you can go get the live image if you want to, the CD of the live. And so the live image, you have to make the question, is this suitable for me? Does this work? Can I do this launcher? Can I have these flavors? What's the architecture, my underlying physical machine? How does it work? Some of the time when we talk about live CDs, we realize that this is very, very small. It fits on a CD. And today's USB drives, well, what size is it right now? I thought I was really doing well when I went out and I bought my USB 3 Patriot drive, a 256 gig drive. I thought, this is monstrous. I'll never have any problems whatsoever. Well, it just turns out that they've rolled out 1 terabyte USB drives, and then if you get a physical drive, I mean, 3 terabytes is huge at this point. So we can fit everything we want on here, and in fact, what I do with this is I do a bunch of different distributions. This actually has about 30 different distributions on it. We're only going to see a few in our lab here. The other nice thing about these live images is they can also produce it in another language. Now, what do I use? I wanted to tell you about one other distribution that's out there, and that's called Kali. Kali is a backtrack version. Okay, well, what's backtrack? Well, backtrack is a tool that is used for security professionals that has all of the tools built into it for security stuff. Most of them are pure Linux. They have no Windows equivalent. The thing that I like about Kali is that it adheres to the Debian standard, which is kind of the middle of the road standard, and it does a lot with packages. And we'll explain packages later on. Okay, so things you need to do. To get anything done on the original operating system, especially when we're playing at this level, is you need to be root. So you may log in as user, but immediately you're going to upgrade yourself to root, and we'll talk about how to do that. Now, being root from a security standpoint and from a regular functionality standpoint is a bad thing. We're learning right now, so we can go ahead and wreck this thing. Now, what you do, if you want to run one command one time as root, what you do is you do the command sudo, and that's it. It gets you in if you've got it set up correctly. What you had to do is you had to add yourself to the sudoer file. Again, we're going to go through that later on. If you want to run as root completely, you could log in as root, or you could just do su, which turns you into the super user.